Today, Hezbollah threatens Cyprus, Mark Rutte is NATO's next Secretary General, and extreme heat hits countries around the world. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Friday the 21st of June, 2024. Earlier this week, the leader of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah warned that Cyprus would become a target if the country allowed the Israeli military to use Cypriot territory during a potential war between Israel and Hezbollah. With tensions escalating on the Israel-Lebanon border, something we discussed in today's TLDR Global video, and the prospect of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah seemingly on the up, the group's leader said that opening Cypriot airports and bases to the Israeli enemy to target Lebanon would mean that the Cypriot government is part of the war, and the resistance, Hezbollah, will deal with it as part of the war. This somewhat surprised mentioning of Cyprus, which is a member of the European Union, has raised eyebrows and prompted the Cypriot government to reiterate its non-aligned and military-neutral foreign policy, saying that Cyprus is not involved and will not be involved in any war or conflicts, adding that it is a pillar of peace in a volatile region. Cyprus is not a member of NATO, but it is an EU member state and does host 2 British military bases. The island, which sits just a few hundred kilometers from the coasts of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, has in recent years developed closer ties with Israel, particularly in regards to energy cooperation, due to the discovery of natural gas deposits in the eastern Mediterranean. On top of this, the Israeli military has used Cypriot territory for training, and the 2 countries' militaries have conducted joint military training drills together, the most recent being in May of 2023. In fact, in 2022, the Israeli military carried out drills in Cyprus, which has similar terrain to Lebanon, that simulated fighting against Hezbollah, according to the Israeli media. However, in response to the threat from Hezbollah, the president of Cyprus emphasized the humanitarian role that Cyprus has played since the outbreak of the war in Gaza, saying that the Republic of Cyprus is not part of the problem. The Republic of Cyprus is part of the solution, and our role in this, as demonstrated, for example, through the humanitarian corridor, is recognized not only by the Arab world, but by the international community as a whole. Now, as I say, if you're interested in learning more about the escalation of tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, then check out the most recent TLDR Global video on the subject, which goes even deeper. Anyway, there's more on the way, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more daily briefing next week. Plus, if you want to support the channel like Michael Krikala, then consider joining the new TLDR membership program for just $1.99. Following months of speculation, outgoing Dutch PM Mark Rutte is set to become the next NATO Secretary General, after his only remaining rival, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis, dropped out of the race yesterday. Now, Rutte has been able to do this by winning over many of his fellow NATO members for being one of the few European leaders who's actually been able to build a rapport with Donald Trump and appease some of Trump's aggressive outbursts on European defense spending. With Trump's possible return to the White House following the US elections in November, this was one of Rutte's key attributes and positioned him as the favorite for the candidacy. But Rutte's road to the top hasn't been plain sailing. Needing the unanimous support of all NATO members to ascend to the Secretary General position, in just under a week, Rutte successfully managed to secure the backing of the 3 remaining holdouts, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia. Now, Rutte has apparently promised to allow Hungary's Viktor Orban an opt-out of NATO efforts to support Ukraine, and promised Slovakia that NATO will help protect Slovakian airspace until it beefs up its own capabilities. Following these discussions, leaders of both countries were successfully swayed and dropped their veto on Rutte's accession, leading the way to his rise to the top. An official rubber stamping by NATO ambassadors is expected next week, in a traditional gathering known as the Dean's Coffee. The Dean, the longest-serving ambassador to NATO, currently Croatia's Mario Nobilo, will confirm consensus for Rutte, who in October will replace Norway's former Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg, who's been at the helm of NATO for a decade, having his term extended 4 times. Now, next up, across the world, people are facing record high temperatures, which has left hundreds dead, with extreme heat waves scorching cities on 4 continents, as the Northern Hemisphere marks the first day of summer. According to BBC meteorologist Chris Fawkes, the heat waves are the fingerprint of climate change. In the US, 86 million people are under heat alerts, and in India, New Delhi has recorded its hottest nighttime temperature on record. As a result, hundreds have been pronounced dead at the Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, amid temperatures above 51 degrees Celsius. Egyptian medical and security services reported 530 Egyptians have died participating in the pilgrimage, up from 307 on Wednesday. It's not only that, forest fires have engulfed Mediterranean countries, and winds from North Africa propelled a scorching front across the Balkans. And with temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius, health authorities in Serbia have declared a red weather alert and advised people not to venture outdoors. Authorities across the Mediterranean are also concerned with the spate of dead and missing tourists amid this dangerous heatwave. On Monday, a 55-year-old American was found dead on the Greek island of Mathraki, the third such tourist death in just a week. In other news, the Spanish government has begun legal action to shut down the Francisco Franco Foundation, a non-profit organization that promotes the legacy of Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, who held power in Spain from 1939 to 1975. Spain's Socialist Party-led government accuses the organization of failing to comply with the Democratic Memory Law, which was approved in 2022 and prohibits any group that, quote, glorifies the coup d'etat and the dictatorship, or extols its leaders with contempt and humiliation of the dignity of the victims of the coup d'etat, the war, or Francoism. Spain's Culture Ministry says that it's begun the legal process of shutting down this group, but a final ruling will be made by a judge after what might be a lengthy legal process. In 2017, more than 200,000 Spaniards signed a petition filed in Parliament asking the government at the time to ban the foundation. But the foundation previously claimed that a ban on it would be unconstitutional. But the attempt to finally close down the group is just the latest move by Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to address the legacy of Francoism. In 2019, for example, following an extended and controversial legal process, Sanchez's government had Franco's remains exhumed from the Grand Valley of the Fallen Monument and reburied them in a private family vault. And finally, we end with some uplifting news from the animal kingdom. The Iberian lynx, one of the world's rarest cats, is no longer classified as endangered, according to a new report published on Thursday by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. The report changes the status of the Iberian lynx from endangered to vulnerable after a surge in numbers. In 2001, the population of mature Iberian lynx was just 62, but this number jumped to 648 by 2022. The total number of young and mature Iberian lynx is now expected to be around 2,000, according to the IUCN. Now, that's good news for conservationists, who have focused their efforts on increasing the abundance of the lynx's main food source, the European wild rabbit, as well as introducing programs to free hundreds of captive lynxes and restore shrublands and forests on the Iberian Peninsula. Before we finish with today's briefing, I wanted to quickly tell you about a project that we're working on called Too Long. Too Long is our new physical magazine that we'll be releasing 3 times a year, running you through a whole bunch of key news events in more detail, and sometimes more intelligently than is possible on YouTube, with us able to choose the topics we think truly matter most and taking the time necessary to really explain them, rather than being constrained by algorithms or click-through rates like we are on YouTube. It's worth clarifying that this really is a serious, high-quality magazine that we're printing, full of interesting journalism and with graphics to bring the stories to life. The first edition we're working on is a UK election special, so it will run through the results of the election and discuss how the victors plan to rebuild Britain in a number of key policy areas. But the other half of the magazine is dedicated to news from around the world, including the European elections, France's snap election, Hungary's upcoming EU presidency, the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the tensions between the US and China, Japan's poly crisis, and of course the US election. If you're interested and want to support the channel, we'd really appreciate it if you consider picking up a copy. Click the link in the description to learn more. Plus, if you use code TLDR daily, you'll get £2 off any order. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching the Daily Briefing.